Episode 5, Self-Inflicted. At this moment, Natalie was stunned. Matt frowned, and the last one of the party of three, Manager Williams, was dumbfounded. Even the surrounding guests were reeling in shock. They were scared senseless by the property ownership certificate that James had opened. Vanessa, who was standing in the crowd, was no exception either. Her face revealed a trace of surprise. It was not an ordinary property ownership certificate, but the best office building in the business hub of New York. The entire floor of Global Financial Center. James's identity made her even more interested. At the same time, intense curiosity ignited in the surrounding guests. They all wanted to know James's true identity. Who was this guy? Someone like him couldn't be a thief. He was clearly a low-key boss. James did not say anything. Instead, he just kept staring at the trio in front of him. His silent gaze caused a trace of panic to rise in their hearts. Looking at the bright red property certificates on the floor, Manager Williams felt like his brain was out of oxygen, and his eyes were seeing black. He felt like he was going to collapse from fear. He did not dare to look James in the eyes. How could he? Compared to James, he was just an ordinary worker. He couldn't afford to offend someone as rich as James, who was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He recalled his rude treatment of James just now. He wished there was a hole here where he could jump into. He wanted to slap himself twice. How embarrassing. He knew that he was done for. He might not even be able to keep his job here. Matt was also astonished. He was a rich man's son, so he naturally knew what such a property signified. This person was someone he could not afford to offend. Nonetheless, his face was full of doubt, despite seeing the certificates with his own eyes. James was his university classmate, so Matt naturally knew him very well. With his financial situation, it would be hard for him to buy a house in the remote suburbs of New York, let alone in the city's business hub. Otherwise, he could not have snatched James's girlfriend, Natalie. How can this guy own such a property? That's clearly out of his league. Is he a rich guy whose identity was hidden till now? Matt temporarily let go of the guilt in his heart and started to think seriously. Today's incident was weighing on his mind. Needless to say, Natalie's expression was the worst of everyone. It was as if she had eaten a fly. She originally wanted to seize James's weakness in front of everyone and expose his identity as a thief. She wanted to see him make a fool of himself, humiliating and breaking his self-respect. However, the reality was cruel. Instead of him, she was the one who got ridiculed. Although she felt embarrassed and angry in her heart, for a moment, she had nothing to say. She did not know how to deal with the sudden change. The guests who had mocked James earlier avoided looking at him. They did not dare to meet his gaze. Although they had a certain status and position in New York, they still couldn't afford to offend someone who owned such property. James stood there with his hands behind his back, still not speaking. Looking at the expressions on everyone's faces, the corner of his mouth rose slightly. A moment later, a faint smile crept upon his face. He was not in a hurry to break the awkward atmosphere. His gaze slowly swept across the crowd, appreciating the different expressions on their faces. These rich people were used to looking down on others. Today, though, they were slapped across the face by James. And they could not say a single word in protest. This was the first time James had experienced this feeling. He felt exhilarated, as if all the frustration and pent-up emotions over the breakup had been vented at this moment. He wanted to enjoy the pleasure of torturing them with his eyes for a while longer. However, the expression on Natalie's face was quickly replaced by doubt. The suspicion in her heart towards James was much stronger than Matt's. One should know that just an hour ago, she was still James's girlfriend. She had slept with James for 5 whole years, and never did she learn that he was hiding such a shocking wealth under his poor guise. Has he been lying to me? Is he a rich kid who has been hiding his identity? If that's true, then I'd have suffered a great loss, Natalie muttered in her heart. The more she thought about it, the more awful she felt. Manager Williams finally could not bear James's gaze anymore. His legs went weak, and he found it hard to continue standing there. "Mr. Tucker, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I was blind and did not recognize your greatness." He lowered his eyes and apologized to James. He didn't even dare to raise his head for a second. To show his sincerity, he crouched on the floor and helped James pick up the property certificates scattered on the floor. After gathering everything, he respectfully handed them back. Manager Williams' actions proved James's innocence even more. Natalie and Matt were simply making trouble for no reason. However, this had once again stoked Natalie's ego. This dramatic episode had damaged her dignity and made Matt lose face. Her embarrassment turned into anger. Combined with her previous analysis, she once again concluded in her heart. Natalie threw caution to the wind. She rushed out and said to Manager Williams, "Mr. Williams, what are you doing? These real estate certificates are fake. Why are you afraid of him? He's a thief, a big liar. Don't be fooled by him. Quick, arrest him. Don't let him escape." She knew James well and understood his circumstances more than everyone here. James would never own such a property, not even in his dreams. "Go away. You don't know anything." This time, Manager Williams did not listen to Natalie's words. Instead, he shouted at her. "What are you doing?" Seeing Manager Williams yell at his girlfriend, Matt immediately rushed forward and questioned him. "Nothing. Tell her not to get in my way and apologize to the guest," Manager Williams said to Matt with a straight face, not giving him any face at all. His attitude had taken a 180-degree turn. Although Manager Williams was just an ordinary office worker, he had accumulated a lot of experience over the years. He had a feeling that James's property ownership certificates were most likely authentic. He could tell a thing or two from the discussions of the surrounding guests. "You..." Manager Williams' attitude towards him made Matt's nose crooked in anger. He almost blew his top. However, this was Manager Williams' territory after all. He would at most not come here to spend money in the future. Apart from that, he could not do anything to him. James did not say a word from the beginning to the end, but the expression on his face became even more exciting. The scene of them hurting each other without him saying anything made him feel very content. What a great feeling. Knowing that he couldn't use force here, Matt could only stand where was. He no longer spoke. Natalie was anxious. She said to the manager again, "Manager Williams, believe me, his real estate certificate is fake. He's a liar." "Natalie, why do you say Mr. Tucker's real estate certificate is fake?" Manager Williams rolled his eyes and retorted. However, the way he addressed them had completely changed. "Because I'm his ex-girlfriend. I've been with him for 5 years. I know his situation like the back of my hand. He's completely poor. He doesn't have the money to buy me Chanel bags, let alone owning property worth hundreds of millions." Natalie was too desperate to care about anything. She simply told them about their relationship. All the surrounding guests finally understood the relationship between the three of them. After Natalie finished speaking, she raised her neck high like a proud swan. She felt that she had already brought out ironclad evidence. James could no longer continue to deceive her and others. At this moment, a man in his 30s suddenly walked over and politely nodded to James. "Sir, may I see your property certificate?" "Of course." Without saying anything else, James took a property ownership certificate from Manager Williams and handed it to the man. The man took the property ownership certificate and started reading it seriously. The entire room turned silent. They were all staring at the man with bated breath, waiting for his confirmation. About 10 seconds later, the man smiled and said, "Mr. Tucker is really young and promising. I never thought that you would possess such wealth at your age. Truly admirable." Although he didn't say it directly, the meaning behind his words was quite clear. His euphemistic words, when they fell into Natalie and the others' ears, were like thunder. "Sir, you are too polite," James politely said to the man. "That's impossible. On what basis are you declaring the property certificate is genuine?" Natalie had gone mad. She rushed to the man without caring about her image and pointed at him. She was like a shrew cursing at others. Because I also have an identical property ownership certificate here. It's for the 23rd floor, though, not as good as Mr. Tucker. The man smiled. Then he took out a property ownership certificate from a tightly wrapped folder in his bag. Natalie could no longer believe her ears when she heard that. She fell to the ground and had nothing to say. At this moment, she felt her face being slapped by James. Her dignity was trampled under James's shoes without any mercy. Natalie had pressed on step by step. She tried her best to humiliate James, but unexpectedly, she herself became the ugliest clown in the audience. What made people laugh was that all of this was her fault. In the end, she had to bear the consequences of her actions.